Welcome back to our class. Today we'll be focusing on the historical antecedents of science and technology. Now, please bear in mind when we say antecedents, this refers to past events, situations, phenomena, or activities which helped shape our society today. Now, when we talk about historical antecedents, we'll be focusing primarily on three important periods. One is ancient period, second is the medieval or the middle period, and of course, the modern age or the modern period. Now, before we go to these periods, I would like you to look at the presentation. Now, if you notice, the problems encountered during the ancient times were still some of the problems that we continuously face today. Now, among the problems encountered by the people during the ancient time include food production, agriculture and industry, communication, transportation and navigation, military and defense, architecture and engineering, medicine and health, aesthetics, power, and energy. Now, as we discuss these periods, the ancient, the medieval, and the modern age or the modern period, you'll see or you'll be able to understand how science and technology contributed in improving their life and even in solving several problems that they've encountered before. Of course, ano ba yung mga problemang na-encounter ng mga tao noon? Nandiyan yung iba-ibang mga sakit, no? Mga dilubyo, and of course, they continuously seek ways on how they could improve their life in terms of food production, agriculture, communication, transportation, and so on. So when we talk about periods, let's focus first on the ancient period. Now, for this period, we'll be talking on several civilizations which made several inventions, and in fact, some of their inventions are still feasible or visible until now or today, and they've greatly improved or helped improve our lives. So the first civilization I want to talk about is the Sumerian civilization. Now, please take note that the Sumerian civilization was referred to by the Akkad people as the land of the civilized kings. Now, among the several contributions na naibigay or nagawa ng mga Sumerians, first one is the cuneiform. The Sumerians were the first one to devise the first writing system, and they called that the cuneiform. Now, cuneiform actually uses several pictures and symbols which are actually carved on clay. And remember, this was the first writing system. On top of that, it was the Sumerians who actually created the first true city, which is Uruk. Now, the Sumerians were able to build the city using only mud or clay. And they used bricks to make houses. And of course, this protected them from harsh weather and, of course, from their enemies. Now, the next one is the one of the greatest structure of the Sumerian civilization is the Great Ziggurat of Ur. It is also called the Mountain of God. This is actually a sacred place. So it's like a place for the holy and a place where their chief god, particularly their priests, are allowed to enter. Now, this is where they make several sacrifices, and this is where they offer their offerings of prayer and their contribution to their god for them to be blessed. On top of that, the Bavarians also were the first to use irrigation and dikes. Now they actually built canals where the waters flow from the mountains to the farmland. So this irrigations and dikes, as we all know, help them also to control flooding. No, as for example, siguro kung may bagyo or kung may mga dilubyo, kapag umulan ng malakas at umaangat yung river, they actually devise a way para hindi umagos yung tubig doon sa kanilang mga komunidad. So they made use of irrigation and dikes. The Sumerians also were the first to use sailboats. Though they actually the purpose of these sailboats is actually to carry several quantities of products. And since nagkakaroon na rin ng exchange of goods during this period. Another contribution of the Sumerian is actually the wheel. So the first wheels were not made for transportation, but farm work and food processes. So imagine nyo, talagang ang focus nila noon is more on agriculture. So they actually try to think of ways on how to transport their goods, their commodities from one place to another, and that's how they were able to create wheel. Now, uh, since we're focusing now, or since we've talked about farming or agriculture, it was the Sumerians who were the first to create the plow. No, this actually now until hanggang ngayon ginagamit pa rin ng mga farmers natin ito. This is actually used to dig the ground where they could plant the seeds, and it is also used by farmers to cultivate larger parcels of land. And of course, this also helped them in amassing the food they produce or the produced food without so much without taking so much time and effort. Now, aside from plow, they also created several roads. These roads became the kumbaga they were able to create a flow of traffic. And because of these, the transportation became more organized during their time. So they made the roads with the same technology they use in making the sun-baked bricks that they laid down on the ground. Now, it is also noteworthy that the Sumerians were the first to use jewelry, and these jewelries were actually made of silver, of gold, and gems. And of course, since nagkaroon na sila ng mga iba't ibang mga gamit or kagamitan or equipment, they were also able to make several weapons which is actually made of bronze. So yan yung mga naging contribution sa atin ng Sumerian civilization. Now, next civilization is the Babylonian civilization. So, kapag naririnig natin ng Babylonia, ang naaalala siguro ng marami sa atin is yung Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Remember, according to records and according to researches, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon is actually one of a kind. In fact, it was actually created by King Nebuchadnezzar, and he offered this to his beautiful queen, which is Queen Amethyst. Okay. Now, for the Babylonian civilization, please take note that among the significant contributions they have is the first map. Okay, it was an ancient Babylonian cartographer who created the world's first map on a clay tablet. Okay, and this actually covers a small region of Babylonia during the Akkadian Empire. It was the Babylonians who actually were the first actually to use constellations to determine weather, climate, and seasons. That's why they are very much engaged in astrology and horoscopy. Okay? Next one is the Egyptians. Of course, pag sinabi natin Egyptians, ang unang pumapasok sa isip natin ay ang pyramid. Now, as we all know, pyramids were served as a tombstone, no? A kumbaga libingan ng mga pharaohs. But aside from the Egypt, or aside from the pyramid, no, the Egyptians actually invented or contributed a lot of technologies that until now ay ginagamit pa rin natin. So remember, it was the ancient Egyptians who really excelled, no, at the field of sciences and had contributed knowledge in several fields like astronomy, medicine, and mathematics. So they also have a variety of medicines which help cure diseases. And kumbaga ginamit ito both ng mga tao at saka syempre ng mga hayop. So among the contributions of the Egyptians include the papyrus. The papyrus is actually the precursor of paper. So the papyrus plant, ang kanyang scientific name ay Cyperus papyrus, is an abundant plant which grows along the Nile River. Now, they were able to process the plants in order to produce thin sheets on which one could write down things. Now, since meron na din silang paper, they were also able to create ink naman. So these inks were used by the Egyptians to, of course, record history, culture, and codified laws. Kung ang mga Sumerians ay mayroong cuneiform, ang mga Egyptians naman ay mayroong hieroglyphics. So it is actually their system of writing wherein they also use symbols, but more of a logographic system wherein they believed by Egyptians to be provided to them by the gods. Okay, so next, it was the Egyptians who actually made use, okay, or the first one to make use of a calendar. Ang kanilang na-invent ay 12-month lunar cycle na calendar. However, because of the appearance of the Sirius star or the dog star in the eastern sky, they were actually able to create a solar calendar. Now, meron ding nagawang cosmetics, no, ang mga Egyptian. In fact, they were the first to use the cosmetics. And one particular cosmetic na very important sa kanila is yung kohl. Now, a kohl is actually an eye makeup or cosmetic which pinaniniwalaan ito, no, which the elite people and of the people of Egypt believe that when you have this eye makeup, no, you are protected from the evil, from the devils or from evil, and your beauty is actually a sign of holiness. Now, kung nakapanood na kayo ng mga movies na like yung The Mummy or The Prince of Egypt or Moses, some of the pharaohs, no, wala silang mga buhok. They are actually bald. And because of that, it was the Egyptians who were the first to wear the wig. No, they wore these wigs, no, for health and wellness purposes and not for aesthetic purposes. So it was used to protect the shaved heads of the wealthy Egyptians from the harmful rays of the sun. Okay. Next, another contribution of the Egyptian is the simple machine. So ano ba tong simple machine na nagawa nila? It's actually the ram and the lever. So most Egyptians use this, no, during construction. Kaya nga they were able to create yung pyramids kahit napakataas noon because they were able to create ramps and lever. Next is the clock. So ancient Egyptians were also one of the first groups of people to divide days into equal parts through the use of timekeeping devices. So sila yung unang naka-discover niyan. Alam niyo yung ginagamit nilang mga sundial or mga obelisk, kay water clock or clepsydra. Okay, ito yung mga first types, no, ng clocks na meron ang Egypt. Next, we have the shadoof. Okay, a shadoof is a hand-operated device used for lifting water. So, parang yung mga wells na meron tayo ngayon, na meron siyang tali at meron container. So, that's actually what they call a shadoof during that time. Okay, so they actually use this or built this close to in the farm and close to irrigating. Kumbaga, it is actually close to the farm, and they actually use this to irrigate, no, their crops and the land na gagamitin nila for farming. Okay. Next, we have the Greek civilization. Please take note that the Greeks, no, in Greeks, there are actually two important schools. One is the Spartan school, and the second one is the Athenian school. The Spartan school is actually a school for military training. So kung napanood nyo na yung movie na 300 or Spartacus, no, makikita nyo doon that those people in Sparta were actually trained for combat and for military training or military purposes. Then for Athenian school naman, this is actually located in Athens, Greece. This is where the philosophers were held or were trained, I should say. So several philosophers na kilala natin include Socrates, Aristotle, and Plato. So doon sila nag-aral, no, sa Athenian school. At ang focus nila is more on knowledge, more on learnings, no, and discoveries. And of course, several experimentations and observations were done in that particular school. So again, remember those school. We have the Spartan school and the Athenian school. Now, when we talk about the Greek civilization, please take note that they were the first, no, to create an alarm clock. Kanina sa Egyptian, it's just a clock, yung mga sundial, no, and ano pa ba, yung mga clocks na ginagamit nila noon. But this time, the Greeks were able to create an alarm clock. So they made use of water or small stones or sand that dropped into drums, which sounded the alarm. So very clever for them. Now imagine, nakaisip sila ng ganoon. Okay. On top of that, they also created a water mill. So it was commonly used in agricultural processes like the milling of grains, which was necessary form of food processing. So yan yung purpose, no, ng water mill. And dahil sa water mill, they were able to produce, no, rice, cereals, and flours, which is actually very common staple, or are, let's say, these are the staple foods, no, ng mga Greeks during that time. Now, they also have the Antikythera mechanism, which is actually retrieved from the Antikythera Greece. It is similar to a mantle clock with a round face and rotating head. So it was believed no, to it was believed and it was used to predict astronomical positions and eclipses. So yan ang gamit ng Antikythera mechanism. Now, the Inipile is actually known as the hero's engine, named after the hero of Alexandria. So, ano ba yung purpose itong ilopal na to? It's actually a steam-powered turbine which spun when the water container was heated. Okay, so ito yung kanilang ginagamit no as a steam-powered turbine. Okay. Next, we have the Roman civilization. Please take note that the Roman civilization was known to be the cradle of politics and governance. So please tandaan niyo yan. Now, as for the Romans, ang mga naging contribution nila includes the first newspaper, which is actually called the Gazette. No, so they engraved this newspaper in metal or stone tablets, and then they were publicly displayed. It was the Romans who actually created, no, the first to create bound books or codex. According to sources, it was Julius Caesar who started the tradition of stacking up papyrus to form pages of books. So most probably it was Julius Caesar who, without even knowingly, siya yung naka-discover or nakagawa ng bound books or codex. Of course, when we talk about Romans, hindi pwede makalimutan dyan yung kanilang mga architecture, yung kanilang mga unique architecture. Okay? And those architectures were actually made up of concrete. Now, another one, which is until now ginagamit natin, is the Roman numerals. So, it was the Romans who devised their own number system and they call it the Roman numerals. Now, the Romans were also performing several procedures, no, medical procedures, and that's why they actually invented several surgical tools. On top of that, aside from these tools, meron din sila mga war weapons. So particularly, meron parang dalawang class or dalawang famous na weapons na meron sila. One is a catapult like. Ito yung parang siyang spoon at ano siyang pag nilagyan siya ng stone ay pwede nilang maitapon sa kalaban. So they call that catapult the ballista. And they also have like a modern version of the bow and arrow, which is actually no, and they call this the scorpion. So it's a long range crossbow that kumbaga pag pinrest lang nila yung button siguro or whatever it is, no, mag-shoot na yung arrow. So they call that the scorpion. And they re-engineered no, yung ballista, yung catapult na sinasabi ko kanina and made it a cost-effective version and they call that the onager. Okay. Next, we have the Mayan civilization. So the Mayan civilization actually originated in Mexico and the northern Central America. So among the several contributions of Mayan civilization, is astronomy, calendar system, and hieroglyphic writing. So meron din silang sariling version ng kanilang pyramid and as you can see, hindi patusok yung nasa tuktok kundi it's somehow flat and of course this actually served as temples or palaces and observatories no to their leaders and to their let's say officials siguro. Okay? Next we also have their contribution in the field of course astronomy. They try to predict eclipses no and of course yung astronomy yung they try to link no yung paggamit ng astronomy sa agriculture and the calendar system. They also have several engineering and architectures kaya sabi ko nga kanina yung kanilang unique style no ng pyramid. Then they also have agriculture, arts, and mathematics. So ang number system nila is actually based on number 20 and concept of zero and positional value. So yan yung mga naging contribution sa atin ng Mayan civilization. Okay. Now, let's talk about the Inca civilization naman. The Inca civilization were, kumbaga, taught, or they were, kumbaga, um, among their contributions include no yung mga stone roads and stone houses. In fact, no, itong mga Incas ay meron ding 12 month calendar no for religious and agricultural purposes and they actually created a quipu which is actually a system of knotted ropes to keep their records. Now, they also have their own textiles. So yan yung mga naging contribution ng Inca civilization. Now, when we talk about the Aztec civilization, no, we can always remember na ang mga Aztecs has a great influence on the development of Mexican culture. So ang kanilang language ay Nahuatl is still spoken in several regions of Mexico. And many festivals which are celebrated around the country come from Aztec traditions. Ano ba yung mga naging contribution ng Aztec? One is the mandatory education, and yung chocolates noon ay ginagamit nila as currency. They also created some antispasmodic medication. Ito yung kapag nangangalay na yung mga kumbaga mga muscles nila, mga binti nila, mga kamay nila, no, they created an antispasmodic medication. Now, siguro ito familiar kayo dito, no, itong chinampa, which is actually kumbaga somehow similar to what we do here in our country. No, meron silang parang the land, the agricultural land is divided into several rectangular areas, and then nasusurround siya ng mga canals or irrigation. So katulad din sa atin, di ba, the field is somehow divided into rectangular areas, and then doon sila nagtatanim, no, ng mga palay and other crops. Okay, so aside from that, they also created calendar system and canoe. Okay, now let's go to ancient China. The ancient China is actually one of the famous civilizations. Now, the ancient or the Chinese civilization were kumbaga established near the Yellow River. So, kasi syempre, pag kung nasaan ang river, nandoon ang food source. And nandun din ang available, others resources na available for living. Now, among the contributions of the Chinese civilization, sila actually ang nangunang gumamit ng paper money. Okay? So yan ang isa sa mga naging contribution ng Chinese civilization. Of course, nandyan din yung printing, pero ang ginamit nila dito ay more like a wood block printing. So wood pa ang ginagamit nila. Siyempre, pag sinabi natin Chinese civilization, hindi pwede makalimutan ang silk, right? And of course, ang taa. No? Ang Chinese ay kilalang kilala, no, sa kanilang mga tsaka. Of course, nandiyan din yung wheelbarrow. Sila yung mga, noon actually hindi pinapansin itong wheelbarrow na to. However, during the Han Dynasty, doon nila na-appreciate yung function nito because farmers were able to transport goods, no, from one place to another with much ease. And then it was the Chinese also who started to use or create and use the compass. So itong mga magnetic compass na to ay nag-originate sa China. Okay. Of course, ang structure na nakikita kahit na nasa outer space ka na, still visible is the Great Wall of China. Okay? Before, marami din sila mga alchemist. Remember, itong mga alchemy na to, they actually create chemicals, potions, elixirs, and ang pinaka-target actually nila is to create an elixir of life. Now, according to record, meron daw silang nabuo no, na elixir, and they call this uyaw. However, as time passed by, no, itong uyaw na to ay hindi naman talaga immortality potion or elixir. It's actually used, no, sa gunpowders and firecrackers today. Okay? So yan yung mga naging contributions, some of the contributions of the Chinese civilization sa atin. Okay. Now, this is the last civilization under the ancient period. So meron tayo, nandyan ang Indian civilization. Actually, they were known to be Harappan civilization or the Indus Valley civilization because they actually they established, no, their civilization near the Indus River. Okay? So among the contribution of the Indian civilization, we have of course yung mga metallurgical works nila, especially iron, medicine. So it was Ayurveda. Ewan ko kung narinig nyo, nabasa nyo yung mga books or yung mga, kumbaga parang mga medicinal plants or herbs na may Ayurvedic function. No, yung Ayurvedic function na to, no, yung term na yun nagmula sa India, Ayurveda. Okay, it's actually commonly used in traditional medicine. Okay, then we also have of course astronomy. No, sila yung kumbaga nakapag-theorize na ang Earth ay spherical in shape, merong 360-day year with 12 months, and kumbaga marami silang mga other discoveries pa na related to astronomy. Then we have mathematics. Sa mathematics naman, kay nandiyan si Madhava. Si Madhava ang kumbaga, naka-discover or nakapag-establish ng mathematical analysis. Nandiyan din si Brahmagupta. Brahmagupta explained the use of zero and the system of numbers. Okay? So ang daming mga na-contribute ng mga Indians in terms of mathematics. Okay? Meron din sila dyan si Mohenjo-daro ruler, yung si Mohenjo-daro yung gumawa ng ruler na yon. And andyan din si Aryabhata who introduced trigonomic functions, tables, techniques, and algebra algorithm. Okay. Now, let's go to the medieval ages. Nung nag-collapse ang Roman Empire, here comes the Europeans. So ito na yung period wherein ang mga Europeans nag-explore and they started colonizing several places. Isa nga tayo sa mga na-colonize ng mga Spaniards. Now, among the contribution of the medieval ages, syempre, dahil mas advanced na yung agriculture, kumbaga yung agricultural sector noon, they actually made use of heavy plows. Okay? Ito yung ginagamit para magbungkal ng lupa. They also have what they call the spinning wheels, which is actually used in transforming fiber into yarns. Ito yung parang doon sa I don't know, I forgot yung Sleeping Beauty, yung natusok siya, natusok siya nung karayom. No, yung ginagamit nila doon, that is actually a spinning wheel. So yan yung ginagamit nila para makapag-produce ng yarn. Okay? Then we have the printing press. The printing press was actually invented by Johann Gutenberg. And kumbaga siya ito yung naging precursor, of course, ng mechanical printing press. Then, of course, since more on conquering nga sila dito, more on colonizing, so they actually created a lot of war weapons. Okay? Now, let's go to the modern ages. So, the modern age naman, we're familiar na doon sa mga discoveries or inventions nila dito. Nandyan yung telescope invented by Galileo Galilei. Nandyan ang microscope invented by Zacharias Janssen. Nandyan din ang pasteurization invented by Louis Pasteur. And of course, by the way, this pasteurization is actually kumbaga the technology or the procedure used in producing milk. Okay? Andyan din yung mga petroleum refineries, andyan ang telephone created or invented by Alexander Graham Bell, andyan din ang calculator, and ang Jacquard loom which was invented by Joseph Marie Jacquard. Ano ba tong Jacquard loom na to? No, it's actually like an upgraded version nung 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 ginamit yung ginagamit ng mga medieval period sa paggawa ng silk. Okay? It's actually a modern version of the spinning wheel. So yan yung jacquard loom. Okay? And then of course, nandiyan na rin yung engine-powered airplane created or invented by the Wright brothers. Andyan din ang television which is mostly associated with John Logie Baird. Okay? Now, sa Philippines naman, medyo quite complicated yung ating civilization because we were colonized by several countries, and before that, knowing that we are an archipelago, meron tayong kumbaga kanya-kanyang civilization or kanya-kanyang kumbaga paniniwala, belief, structure sa kanya-kanyang mga lugar. So, instead of focusing on the Philippine civilization, I would like to introduce to you some of Filipino scientists. Although this is just a few, pero marami pang mga scientists na talagang Filipino scientists na nakagawa ng remarkable discoveries and contribution hindi lang sa ating bansa kundi sa buong mundo. We have here Manuel Guerrero, siya yung nag-study ng berry-berries sa infants during the Spanish era in our country. Of course, nandiyan din si Leon Maria Guerrero, who was considered to be the father of botany in the Philippines and the first licensed pharmacist in the Philippines. Nandiyan din sa Anacleto del Rosario, who was considered to be the father of Philippine Science and Laboratory. And siya din ang kauna-unahang nakapag-produce ng alcohol out of Nipa palm. Okay? Next, we have Abelardo Aguilar. Siya naman yung nakagawa ng erythromycin. So could you imagine that? Kung sa ibang bansa meron silang Alexander Fleming, nakaimbento ng penicillin out of Penicillium notatum. Meron din tayong Abelardo Aguilar na nakagawa ng erythromycin from Streptomyces erythraeus. So imagine no yung galing at brilliance ng mga Filipino scientists. Itong si Isa Mijeno, actually recent lang siya. He actually created the sustainable alternative lighting lamp or what we call the salt lamp. It actually uses water and salt like a brine solution para mag-produce ng light. So this is actually a remarkable contribution in a sense that yung mga far-flung areas na wala pa ring mga kuryente ay nakaka-experience no ng liwanag because of the invention of Isa Mijeno. Now, sa mga kababaihan naman natin dyan na conscious sa kanilang mga nunal or moles, don't worry kasi si Dr. Rolando de la Cruz ang naka-invento ng mole or mole remover from the extracts of the cashew nut. Okay? Last batch na to, pag kumain kayo at gumamit kayo ng ketchup, let's say sa fries or sa chicken or whatever food you have, please don't forget Maria Orosa. Kasi siya ang nag-create no, ng banana ketchup. You know, I really believe na talagang napakagaling nating mga Filipino. Also yung ating mga Filipina. Alam nyo ba that the first Filipino or Filipina, or the first woman to be accepted at Harvard University, to study at Harvard University, is a Filipina, no other than Dr. Fidel Mundo. Si Dr. Fidel Mundo ay actually a multi-awarded scientist kasi ang dami niyang mga naging contribution. One of her remarkable contribution nga is yung medical incubator na gawa sa indigenous and cheap materials. Saan ba ito gawa? Gawa ito doon sa traditional na laundry basket. At ang ginagawa nila doon, nilalagay nila siya ng hot water. And of course, meron siyang parang compartment kung saan nila nilalagay yung bata. Remember, no, ang incubator ay ginagamit ng mga premature babies para sila ay lumaki ng maayos. Now, aside sa nasabi ko na siya yung kauna-unahang babae na na-accept sa Harvard University, kauna-unahang Asian woman na na-accept sa Harvard University, siya din ay nakagawa no, ng siya ay din nakapag-contribute sa immunization, no, sa jaundice at saka sa discovery ng gamot sa jaundice and of course yung brat diet na ginagamit no, ng mga may diarrhea. Ano ba itong brat diet? Ito yung paggamit ng or pag-inom or pagkain ng saging and ng mansanas and whatsoever. Okay? And of course, the last is Enrique Austria. Okay? Enrique Austria invented the meconium drug testing. Ito yung actually ginagamit no para protect yung mga fetuses no sa sinapupunan ng mga nanay. Kasi there are some women who abuse drugs and one way to detect that is the use of meconium drug testing. Now, I repeat, napakarami pang mga Filipinos ang may remarkable contribution no sa ating bansa at sa ibang mundo, sa ibang bansa at sa ating mundo, no, the world itself. Okay, now this actually sums up the discussion for module 2. But please bear in mind that you'll be answering no, yung worksheet na i-prepare ko sa inyo, which will be kumbaga available kaysa at makukuha ninyo no, sa inyong mga mayors kasi ipapasa ko yun sa inyo. And there will be some activities or other important matters na kailangan yung gawin at sagutan para mas kumbaga ma-enforce no, yung learning na meron kayo dito sa Module 2. However, that's the end of our discussion. I'll be seeing you in our next discussions or next lectures. Okay, thank you and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.